thought this would be a better video to do than just my top 10 albums of the first half of 2019, because I'm sure all of you have heard all of the albums that are in my list, and I didn't want to bore you, and I would rather show you something new. So if you guys find new music from this video, either you like it or you just realize that it exists, then my job is well done, because that is the purpose of this video, is to put people onto music that they might not have heard before. I chose to do this video instead of a regular top 10 just of my top 10 albums of the first half of 2019, just because I thought that would kind of be overdone because everyone else is doing it, and I don't think anyone really cares what my opinion is on albums like that. I just wanted to put people onto more music like this that they haven't heard of maybe. So if anyone finds new albums to listen to from this video, let me know, because that's the whole point of making this video, is to show people new music that they might enjoy. Alright, so before we start, I just want to say I'm in no way, shape, or form an expert on ambient music. I have no idea what I'm doing, and when I'm describing a lot of these albums, I sound like a complete idiot. But that's okay, because the reason I'm making this video is for you guys to listen. So if I describe it stupidly, just go listen to the album and see for yourself, because I'm bad at explaining things. Yeah, see, look, I can't speak English correctly, but that's okay, because you guys can listen to the albums. I'm sure a lot of this video will come off as super pretentious and really obnoxious, and that's because a lot of ambient music is super pretentious and really obnoxious. Almost every review I have looked at for some of these ambient albums has been really, really annoying, because they're like, I feel like I'm walking in a field and the meteor is coming down, and I can hear in my brain, and it's I can hear it, and that's how reviews for these albums are like, and I'm just like, it sounds good, and that's all I know. So if I just say, it sounds good, I think it's made of this, then that's mostly what I say in this video, which is really annoying, but that's all I know. I know that it sounds good, and I think that it's made of these instruments or tape loops or whatever. So if I sound dumb, you don't understand me, it's probably because I am dumb and I don't understand myself. So I hope you guys enjoy, and take a listen for yourself if you're confused or if you're intrigued. You know, have a good one. Alright, we might as well just jump right into it. I think we're just gonna go from 10 to 1, make it easier, get some more suspense, and we'll probably throw some honorable mentions in there when we can. So first off, I'm gonna break the rules a little bit, because there's 2 albums by the same artist. His name is Zach. It's Chinese characters, but he's definitely an American man. After researching a little bit, he owns an ambient label called Past Inside the Present, and they've been releasing stuff all year that sounds really great, but I decided to showcase some of his albums just because he's been the one that's curating it all, and so he's a little more important than a lot of the other people that are on the label. Both of these albums are great. The first one is a self-titled, the other one is called Orchestral Tape Studies, I think. Orchestral Tape Studies, I was correct. But obviously Orchestral Tape Studies is tape loops, orchestra sounds. So it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot more melody in it than some of the other ambient albums that are on this list, just because he kind of takes the raw tape sounds of the orchestra and lets them breathe a little bit. For the self-titled one, there's a lot more texture to it and less melody. I would say I probably prefer the self-titled, but like I said, both are great records, and I definitely suggest both of these. If you're just looking for a new ambient artist, maybe you haven't heard of him before, if you're already into ambient. But yeah, the label's great, artist's great, both albums perfect. Next up, at number 9, we have Hotel Neon with Vanishing Forms. This is an album that came out early 2019. It was kind of one of the first that I was put on to. And it's comprised of 8 tracks, and they're basically 8 different ambient textures. All it is really a drone record with super, super dense textures. A lot of the bass and white noise in this album is super prominent, so I would really suggest listening to this album with headphones, just because of how much this artist is able to fill out the space in the mix. There's really, it's super full. There's a huge sound to every single one of these tracks on this album. So I think it's probably a mix of tape loops and live recordings, because every once in a while you can hear a tinge of melody, maybe guitar or like an arpeggiated synth somewhere. But overall, a super great album with amazing textures. I was loving this at the beginning of the year. I haven't listened to it a while, but I listened to it last night just to get an idea of what I'm talking about right now, and it sounds pretty great. I enjoy it a lot. Next album, number 8, has a little more of a story behind it. I haven't slept to music in a really long time. When I was a kid, I used to listen to Enya's Watermark on CD every single night, so that whole album is subconsciously kind of branded into my brain at this point. But this album was completely made for sleeping. It's called Seraphim by How to Disappear Completely, and this whole project, this whole artist is dedicated to sleep studies, and apparently they did some study where they found that these sounds would be the best for resting and relaxation. So I tried it out a couple times, and honestly, I don't know if I'm just being a pretentious idiot here, but it helps. Like, I really did. I felt like I got a better sleep listening to this album. And the fact that it's meant for resting and relaxation, it makes it kind of weird to analyze and look over in a critical sense, just for this list and kind of others like it. But I mean, if you really want to get the full experience of the album, let yourself get sleepy, let yourself get tired while listening to it, because that's what it's for. So I don't think, I mean, even with a lot of records on this list, I think if it puts you to sleep, if it makes you tired and relaxes you, that's kind of the point of the album. There's a lot of albums that are meant to be a little more provocative than others on here, but some of the ones, like the ones I've talked about before, Orchestral Tape Studies, the Zach self-titled one, Hotel Neon, those are all albums that I could definitely fall asleep to, and that's not a bad thing. I think that's one great thing about ambient music, is you can always have it in the background, and it's never something where you have to be right on it and you have to be paying attention to everything that's happening. So Seraphim is a great album that I think I will remember quite longer than a lot of the other albums, but it's so low on the list just because I never really found myself listening to it when I didn't want to fall asleep, which was interesting. It's a new experience. There's not a lot going on. It's mostly tape loops, really dense textures like Hotel Noon, maybe not as loud, more on the mids, highs and lows are kind of crunched in, but it's super concise, not in a time sense. I think it's an hour and 30 minutes, but like in a textural sense, there's not a lot going on at all. But I think that is to the betterment of this album. There's not a lot going on because there's not a lot supposed to be going on, if you get what I'm saying. Number 7, we got Sanmi 451. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but who cares? And we have the album called Nacht Music. I think that is German for night music, if I'm not mistaken. Haven't looked it up, but I'm just guessing. And this is a great album. I was drawn to this album because of the album cover, like plenty others on this list, and it's kind of a space-themed thing. You can see an astronaut on it, and it's just a really cool style of art, and I was interested, so I took a listen. And space album, I love space albums. Mort Garrison and William Basinski and so many other people that I love and admire have done great space albums. Albums based on space, that is. Even Brian Eno, another one. But Sonmi 451 creates one of the more unique albums on this list. There's a lot of rhythm in this album. Just from the little clicks and pops that you hear all over, they're kind of run through this crazy spacious delay where it creates a rhythm every time a one shot is hit. So if there was just one drum sound, then it would kind of repeat in a really cool rhythmic pattern. So I would love to figure out how he did that. It sounds super interesting, and I really like the idea of just using delay for creating rhythmic sounds. And that's all over this project. There's a bunch of delay on everything. It's super, super rhythmic. Like, I don't know, it's really great. It's a cool experience to have, you know? On this album you can recognize a lot of synth timbres that are associated with space music. There's a lot of really just like clean saw waves and sine waves on here, just kind of soaring around. And keeping it simple is something that this artist does really well. I think giving into the cliches of space music, or whatever you might call it, works really well for this artist just because of the risks that he takes in terms of the pops and clicks for the delay part of it. But yeah, really straightforward. It's pretty short, but it does the job like every other thing on here. Number 6, I have a nice Instagram account to thank for this suggestion. Musical Charts. If you want to follow him, give him a nice follow, give him some love. Good man. But OJ Rum with Swollen Lips on the Horizon is his 2019 two-sided synth ambient sort of thing. I'm really bad at classifying these albums. I apologize. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really new to this, so I apologize. But his 2019 ambient sort of synth project, I'm sure there's a lot of modular synthesizers on here because it sounds like it, and I'm a genius and I know everything about modular synths, so definitely I would know when I hear one. Also, there's an insane amount of white noise on this album, and normally I wouldn't probably be the biggest fan of that if I'm just listening to sit down and relax for an ambient album, but it works really well. Just kind of fill out the space in the spectrum of sound. So works really well. Simple album, does a good job. Also, OJ Rum has some of the best album art that I have seen in a very long time. A lot of his collages are super cool. I don't know who does his art, he might do it himself, but great stuff. I really enjoy it. Next album is pretty straightforward in its sound, but a little more complex in its backstory. Oliver with Drone Activity is one of the more interesting releases this year, just because it's Oliver. If you don't know who Oliver is, they were originally a Norwegian black metal band, because I found them through things like this. Dark Throne Transylvanian Hunger, I watched a couple documentaries, and I found Oliver, and I think one of their songs, Not Saved, I forget what album it's off of, but it's like 9 minutes long, and it's just some tape loops, and it sounds beautiful. So they're a lot more, they have a lot more depth than most Norwegian black metal bands. They're super interesting, and they've released so many different kinds of music that it's just really, it's really inspirational at points, because that's kind of what I want to do. I'm not really locked down on any genre, but I want to make a lot of different genres of music, and I think seeing a band that does that in actuality is really interesting and inspiring to me. So since 2016, they released an album which is a big acronym or just gibberish. I can't really tell. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it is a bunch of letters. And after that drone record, it was super straightforward. I think they did some work with Sun, that's how I pronounce it. I think that's the best way to pronounce it. Sun is really good. And this is a cool album too. I would put this on here, but I forgot. But it's really good. Dang, I should have put this on here. Number 10, Sun Life Metal. This is an honorable mention. How about that? Honorable mention, Sun Life Metal. Because it's really good. I got this at Record Store Day, and I didn't listen to it until like a week after I bought it. But it's great. It's a drone album. What do you think? It's Sun. Oh, just fell on the ground. I'm gonna go ahead and put these away before they fall. Okay, so in 2016 they released that crazy drone album. People were not very fond of it because it was a drone album. Not many people were fond of drone to begin with. So in 2017 they released a synth pop album, I think. Yeah, in 2017 they released a synth pop album, and people loved it. It got super high critical and fan reviews. A lot of people were super crazy for it. I enjoyed it. Personally, it's not my favorite genre of music, but I thought it was really great. Super interesting stuff. But then I think in 2019 they've gone back into the drone. And they've gone deeper than ever before. This is one of the most drone albums that I have ever heard. It's really something. It's out there. So not much else to talk about. If you want to listen to a drone album, I think this is hardcore drone right here. Hardcore drone. So if you want some hardcore drone, slap it on, give it a listen. I think it's only on Bandcamp, as are I think a couple other releases. I know the Zack albums at number 10 were originally only on Bandcamp, but I think they recently got added to Spotify and stuff. But I'm pretty sure the Oliver is still only on Bandcamp. I can't remember, but I know you can find it on. You can find every single one of these albums on Bandcamp. Ooh. Number four is an album that I forget, and I just looked at it and I forget already. No. Number 4 is the second half of Tim Hecker's double album, started last year with Konoyo, now finished with Onoyo. I don't know how to pronounce either of them. I hope I'm doing it justice. Kind of a double album, the second half of a double album, with his 2018 release, Konoyo. And let me check the name of this Japanese traditional thing because I forget. They were both recorded with a Japanese gagaku ensemble. I sound really dumb. I sound stupid, but this album does not. Both of the albums sound really foreign, and it's refreshing to hear something that's not a westernized version of ambient music, I guess. It still seems kind of out there and abstract, and that's something that ambient music doesn't do a lot. A lot of the time it's really straightforward, and there's not a lot going on because it's ambient music, but for Tim Hecker, he always manages to bring in something new and something fresh. He's been doing this for a long time now, and I've enjoyed every single release he has given to the public gladly, and hopefully I can see him live one day because this stuff is insane. It was recorded with the traditional Japanese ensemble thing in some Tokyo Buddhist temple, So there was like a ton of improvisation and weird instruments that went into this album, which is super interesting, and I would love to hear more. So we did, and he gave us another 30-minute record. I think the other one was an hour long. Cool stuff, Tim Hecker. And then I was like, cool stuff, Tim Hecker, and he gave me another 30-minute record. So I'll take all I can get, and I will listen to it until I die. At number 3, we have an artist named Finesse, and I have been a fan of his for a while. I think I found him when I was trying to research field recordings before I made my Lost in New York thing. Whatever I call it, Sounds of New York. I couldn't remember what I called my own album. It's because it's so boring. Purposefully. But when I was researching field recordings, I kind of just looked up field recordings on Spotify, and I found his album called Field Recordings with the cover being of a tractor, and I thought that was pretty funny. I thought it was hilarious, ha ha ha. So I listened to it, and it's beautiful. The guitar sounds in that album are so good, and I want to recreate them very badly. A lot of his stuff containing guitar is some of my favorite works of his. All of his guitar timbres and tones are so great and so interesting, and I love to hear it. And again, he comes through on his 2019 album Agora with some great guitar sounds, great backing synth, and just kind of an overall symphonic sound to the album. The guitar tones are so good, and I want to hear them over and over again, and it's beautiful and great, and it mixes so well. And this is the pinnacle of ambient music for me. It's so perfectly mixed. Everything goes together so well. The instrumentation is amazing. I really enjoy listening to this album. I've listened to it a lot. As you can see, I really enjoy it. And like, this is one of my favorite ambient artists as well. So to release new albums like this is something that I didn't really expect. I didn't even realize that he was really still active until I got the notification that this had released. And I'm very happy about it, because this is a great album that I think you all should listen to. Much like number 4, what's it? 5. Much like number 5, which was the Oliver album, Drone Activity. This album is great, but I think it does have a more interesting backstory that helps the album out a little bit. With number 2, we have William Basinski's On Time, Out of Time. William Basinski is one of my favorite artists ever. The Disintegration Loops, Cascade is so good. The Numbers one, also great. But this is one of his most dense projects. It has so much sound to it. And the reason why is because he sampled a black hole from 1.3 billion years ago, somehow. So apparently he got in touch, he got in touch with this one company called LIGO, L-I-G-O, and they are wave researchers or something like that. I'm butchering this really badly, but that's okay, because I don't care. The wave researchers somehow got a recording of a black hole that had collapsed 1.3 billion years ago. So they gave that recording to William Basinski for him to make music out of, and he delivers. This is crazy stuff. I've never heard a bass like this, and I think that's part of the black hole, and that's why it sounds like that. It's so crazy. Like, all of the dynamics on this album are super cool. There's a lot of sweeps and ducks and jumps in the dynamics, and it's really orchestral. You can tell he is more than an ambient artist, he is a composer, and that really comes out in this album. There's a lot of super interesting things going on at one time. You can definitely pay attention to the timbre, pay attention to the sound, try and notice what you think is a black hole. There's a lot of fun things to do in this album, but I think this is also an 8-part. But yeah, every single track, beautiful, and this is an album that you can feel. Get a good sound system, or get good speakers or headphones. Listen to this album, because you can feel it. Like, if I listen to it in my car speakers, it sounds amazing, because I can turn it all the way up and sit in my car and I can feel it in my chest, because it's great. And it's, Thank you, William Basinski. Before we get to number 1, numero uno, the big wahoo, I have a few honorable mentions. Just one, actually. I spoke about the other one before. We'll grab it real quick. Sun with Life Metal. Beautiful, great record, cool drone metal, guys. I like drone metal, guys. So this is drone metal. Enough said. It's not as heavy as a lot of their other records. I forget the one record, but it's the guy recorded his vocals in like a coffin or something, and it sounds like he's right behind you if you're listening to it with headphones on, and it's scary, and it's scary. I don't like it. I mean, I do. It's freaking awesome. Flippin' cool, bro. It's flippin' amazing. Also, the other second honorable mention is Late Night Tales from Floating Points. I didn't include this because it's not an ambient album, but it has some ambient tracks on it. So it is a weird compilation that this one guy I guess he makes a lot of them. I never heard of him before until this year when I was researching this album, this list. But he's just a guy who likes a lot of different kinds of music, and he makes collections of music, and he puts them all together. And some of the tracks are ambient, and the ones that are really good. So give it a try, listen to some new stuff. There's a lot of different genres on here, so I didn't want to put it on due to it not being an ambient album, but still cool nonetheless. Alright, now you know what's next. My number one album, my number one ambient album. My number one ambient album of the first half of 2019. Woo! Cellar with, I'm gonna put it here because Cellar with album I can't pronounce. Shay. I was talking to Ben and I thought it was sexy, pronounced sexy. I don't know why. It's not how it's pronounced at all. I think. I don't know. But it's, I think Cellar is an American guy that moved to Japan and has just been recording stuff there for a really long time. I think a couple years. That's not a long time. That's long enough for me. I've only been alive a couple years. But, these are a result of a lot of the recordings that he has gotten in Japan. There's some classic tape loops, classic ambient textures made with synth, guitar, stuff like that. But then there's also a nice little nugget for you boy. He's got a lot of field recordings on this album. And that's kind of what drew me to it when I was researching field recordings. I had found out about this artist and I followed them on Bandcamp, and when they released it, I listened to it over and over and over again. I think this was one of the first ambient albums that I had listened to this year, and it's kind of stayed at the top of my list just because of how personal it feels with the field recordings, and it blends seamlessly into the music. And that's just kind of the main ooh-ha about this album, is how good it sounds. And I really enjoy like the down to earth. A lot of the other albums on this list are super epic, really big. They fill out a lot of space. This album is super modest, very humble, and it just sounds like somebody's giving you a hug. And that's an album that I have needed for a lot of this year. So I am very happy to say Cellar has gained my #1 spot. Woo! God, I hope I get a task cam. This video sounds horrible.